Hi guys! Yesterday the rest of the ITT vloggers and I were discussing the newly signed USMCA, which, as we all know, will replace NAFTA once it's ratified. And while we were talking about the topic, we decided that we wanted to share with you a brief analysis and comparison about the chapters that we discussed. So the chapter that I will tell you about is chapter 17, which was chapter 14 in NAFTA and is about financial services. Okay, so in order to understand chapter 17, we're going to be discussing 8 provisions. There are 3 completely new provisions regarding financial services in the USMCA, which are related to regional macroeconomic stability, market access, and payment. So what's more important about them is that it's recognizing the importance of macroeconomic stability, it's being specific about market access regarding financial services, and it grants financial institutions access to payment and clearing systems. There's another completely new provision that talks about computing facilities, which NAFTA didn't talk about, and it states that a physical location of computing facilities cannot be a condition for a license of a financial institution in another party's territory. Let's talk about the provisions that did exist but have been changed by the USMCA. Changes made to these provisions are mostly made for them to be more specific and are related to the scope, the transfer of information, and insurance services. And the last provision we're talking about is transparency, which is actually quite similar to NAFTA, but it's a little bit more specific. And it speaks generally about ensuring that reasonable standards will be applied when it comes to transparency measures. Finally, USMCA is quite recent, so there hasn't been a chance to really go into advantages and disadvantages. But what do you think? What do you think are the advantages and disadvantages? Do you think there is more of one? Personally, I think there are more advantages than disadvantages since it's more specific and it's more beneficial for financial institutions, and it will also open new possibilities for financial services. Anyway, thanks for listening to me, guys, and if you have any questions, please contact me. And well, that's it. Bye!
So now I will talk to you about telecommunications. That is a very important concept that was skipped from NAFTA into the USMCA. This chapter has a very huge changes and opportunity of improvement. The first change of this chapter is that now the chapter passed to be from number 13 to number 18, and additionally they create 23 new articles. In my opinion, this chapter was one of the most important chapters to change because the time changed, technology changed, and new markets emerged with these technologies, so it was necessary. Also, a very important thing to highlight with this chapter is that there is one of the lucky chapters to have an impartial panel to solve disputes, so they will skip national tribunals. Very important to highlight is how this will improve your daily life, and let me tell you that the answer is first that the article obligates Mexico to improve infrastructure. So if Mexico improves their technology and their infrastructure, a lot of investors will be interested in being here. So we will have like a platform as Disney, Verizon, Warner Bros. Here in Mexico. And if Mexico have more platforms and investors, the competition will improve and the tariff will be lower. Also, your internet will be faster with the technology of 5G. Finally, my opinion about chapter 18 of telecommunication is that is one of the chapters that was rescued and that will improve Mexico in every aspect.
Hi guys, so I'm going to talk about Chapter 19, what used to be after the review and dispute settlement, anti-dumping and countervailing duty matters in USMCA. Chapter 19 belongs to digital trade. It is not specifically defined in the chapter, but the chapter by its terms applies to measures adopted or maintained by a party that affect trade by electronic means, includes 18 articles and 1 annex which are based on Chapter 14 of the TPP. It is definitely the first agreement in contemplating digital issue in Mexico and the first agreement in the whole world to include every aspect regarding digital trade. So much that the White House itself claimed to have the strongest machine. Well, the main reason for the creation of this chapter was mainly because in 1994, when NAFTA came into force, it really didn't exist digital trade at all. So they had to. This chapter includes important principles that will still reflect and ensure a well-established agreement and the proper implementation of it, which are four. And for the creation of this chapter was because in 1994, when NAFTA came into force, it didn't exist digital trade, so they needed to implement the agreement into the 21st century. Also, for protecting customers, prohibit discriminatory measures from being applied to digital products distributed electronically, and ensuring that data can be transferred across borders. Well, for the advantages and disadvantages, it is the newest chapter of the USMCA. There's not much data we can recall on, but the first advantage is that Mexico and Canada accepted the interactive computer services and some provisions. As for the disadvantages, their only focus right now is on the rules associated with data that restrict data localization policies and bans restrictions on data transfers across borders. Well, I hope you liked it, and if you have any questions about this chapter, you can contact me. See you later.
So the new stuff is heavily related to the digital world and all that has to do with the internet. So algorithms, softwares, data, and content created on the internet is now totally protected by this type of laws. Internet service providers are also now conditioned under the USMCA. So if any of the governments decides that it wants to add some information to YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, for giving some examples, these businesses cannot actually do it. So all the information that is now on this kind of platforms is protected, and that's basically like the biggest impact or actualization that this chapter has had. Now, if you're a creator and you're trying to use someone else's content, you cannot do it. But thinking about a little bit more about the things that have stayed the same are trademarks, patents, and copyrights. There is not a very big institutional change over these topics. The only noticeable change is that the terms have been prolonged. So for example, if a patent used to be for 5 years, now it's going to be for 10 years. And this has resonated a little bit more in Canada, that has very specific laws about this type of remarks. So Canada has to do a lot more of actualization to fit into the USMCA standards. So the advantage is that there's going to be more protection for creators and their content. There's going to be a promotion for innovation in the three countries, and there's going to be an improvement in the quality of services and products that we all receive and consume. On the not so bright side, there is an standardization to US levels. That means that we have kind of given to what the US government wanted. There's going to be a privileged position for technologically developed areas, which will be bad for places that are going to be marginalized by this. And the challenges, which are always important, is in the case of Mexico, is the low-income population versus the high cost of medicines. Canada has institutional arrangements to do. US government has to reach to a consensus. But that will be it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope we'll see you on the next highlight.
So now we're going to talk about the chapter 21, in which in NAFTA agreements was the chapter 15. And the new updates of this chapter was like they added a new topics. In order to understand more about this chapter 21 in the USMCA agreement, in which is competition policy, it's necessary to understand more about the definition. So That means the party shall maintain national competition that prescribe anti-competitive business conduct to promote competition in order to increase economic efficiency and consumer welfare, and shall take appropriate action with respect to the conduct. The new update that has this chapter, the competition policy, is because we have a lot of competition nowadays, so it has to be regulated in order to stop the loopholes that the NAFTA had. So what are the new articles that the competition policy talks about? First of all, we have the procedural fairness in competition law enforcement that said that a judicial or administrative will follow an investigation into an alleged violation. Now, the next article concerns about corporations. That means that parties shall strengthen corporations regarding those commercial practices to hinder market efficiency. So nowadays we have to cooperate. After the cooperation of the companies, it is necessary to talk about consumer protection, that the parties shall recognize the information in order to create efficiency and competitive markets. Now the last two articles talks about transparency and consultation, which means that the enterprises have to open up to the markets and the parties with no more secrets attached, and if anyone have a doubt, there is a commit to fulfill that request and follow it. For me, after seeing all these articles that are updates of the competition policy, I think we have a few advantages because now it's regulated by the parties and it is good.
Hello everyone, I'm Jorge Aguirre, your favorite international trade treaties blogger, and today we're going to talk about, guess what, the chapter 22 of the new USMCA agreement. So you may be thinking, what the hell is the chapter 22 about? Well, chapter 22 talks about especially the state enterprises that are companies owned by the governments. So as my other blogger partners mentioned, this new agreement has a lot of changes and the chapter 22 is not the exception. This topic was mentioned in chapter 15 of NAFTA and it only said three important things. First, that it's okay to have a state-owned enterprise. Second, that companies needs to act in accordance with the parties' obligations. And the third one, but probably the most important, about the non-discriminatory treatment to the companies with foreign investment located in Mexico. Now, this topic is now in the chapter 22 of the new agreement, and as you might imagine, it has now a bigger importance because it has an entirely chapter. And in this new chapter, they touch some different topics that are very important. For example, the administrative bodies over civil claims that now has to be in the national courts. They also talk about the non-commercial assistance that now is prohibited, such as loans, for example, and about the injury that state enterprises can cause to the industries. But the most important thing is the Article 22.12. A new special committee is going to be created by the government's representative to care all the topics about the state enterprises. As you can see, there were a lot of additions for this new agreement, and also they maintain the old article, so that's one of the biggest advantages of this new agreement. Hope you enjoy, guys.